Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Survive This Crate, where we combine our love for horror movies and RPGs and ask ourselves the question, can we survive this horror movie? With me today, as always, is my co-host Kylie. Kylie, how are you doing?
I am doing great, especially now that we are at the finale of our spooktacular for the year. Thank you to our
Mhm.
audiences who've joined us. This spooktacular episode, we're taking a little bit of a different avenue. You're probably tired of hearing about vampires by now, so we are going to take you through the origins of Halloween and where Halloween came from. And maybe there'll be a little bit of a tasty surprise at the end. In regards to candy, nothing weird. Don't make it weird, okay?
Just as long as you didn't hide anything poisonous in the candy, right?
Exactly.
I'll go ahead and start us off with the history of Halloween. For our audiences who don't know out there, there is an ancient Celtic festival called Samhain. And Kylie, I think you had the years for that. When was this time period
Yes. So
specifically?
this was during the Iron Age, and the Iron Age was from 1200 BC to 550 BC. So sometime within that era, Samhain was the Celtic festival that celebrated the end of the summer, right before the dark season.
It was also just a festival for celebrating the new year,
Mhm.
specifically November 1st, which was also kind of their celebration of the start of the dead period where summer and spring were seen as the seasons of life.
Mhm.
Fall and autumn were seen as the seasons of death. And yeah, so the Festival of Samhain marked the transition from the lighter half of the year to the darker half of the year, which makes
Hmm.
sense when you think about it, daylight savings time and whatnot. So we have
Yeah.
darker days coming up, and it was believed that during this time, the bridge between the afterlife and Earth were a lot more, let's say, flexible,
Mm.
flimsy rather, or permeable, other adjectives.
Other adjectives
So
that spirits could cross the veil, essentially.
exactly. I like that. The veil. So during this time, a lot of pagans would use it to kind of bring honor and remembrance to their ancestors. There would be a lot of celebrating of past family members, which is, I guess, something that kind of inspired Day of the Dead for Hispanic culture. But
Mhm.
also, people would sometimes try and ward off evil spirits. They typically did that by wearing costumes and starting bonfires. And then there were, you had a few other traditions as well. They typically liked to celebrate and have a good time during this period of darkness going on. So they would honor the gods with a witch's circle and offer bread and light candles, all for the basically they were holding a seance. This is all part of their
Mm.
seance ritual. So trying to communicate with spirits. Then we have what's called a dumb supper. Some families will hold this. Basically, what all that means is that you would eat in silence, and then after you finish eating, you would share memories of dead ancestors. Now, you might be asking, but Nick, what do they eat at this dumb supper? And you know what? That was the most important question to me, too. This dinners here during a dumb supper would primarily consist of fall fruits and vegetables. We're talking like apples and squash or whatnot.
Ooh,
Um,
sounds good.
and then tables were always decorated with black tablecloths, and you had black dinnerware, so black plates. Everything was just dark
Mhm.
and brooding. And then for dessert, everyone enjoyed a nice what's called soul cake. Now,
Ooh.
I tried to look up the ingredients for one, but I couldn't find a very clear recipe for it. But it's just, a little sweet treat dessert made of just, your basic cake ingredients, flour, water, sugar, oil. Not water, my bad. Scratch the water. Ooh, this was the big one, Kylie, that we can have a little discussion back and forth about. So that was so Samhain here, that's how it was celebrated.
Hmm.
And later on throughout the years, it was there was a lot of misconstrusions that misconceptions that were seen of this celebration.
Hmm.
So modern day culture, for a while at least, tried to portray this as worshiping of the demon rather than, I guess, worshiping of Earth. I don't think it was necessarily demonic, but basically where that kind of stems from, and you can kind of give your opinion on it too if you want. But there's a man by the name of Charles Valancy, who is a British colonel and military surveyor,
Hmm.
and this was during the 1700s. He published a series of books trying to prove the people of Ireland that the Irish people originated from India. There we go. Which I kind of read that and I was like, that's a little, I don't know where you're getting your basis off of that, sir. But in that book, he actually is quoted as describing the festival of Samhain. He thought Samhain was the name of a demon god of death,
Oh,
rather
when it
than just
literally means summer's end. That's
exactly.
what it means.
But he didn't know that,
He didn't know that.
and
He didn't
he didn't
have
know that.
Wiki to look that up and be like, "Oh, that's what that means."
And here was the thing: he didn't have a great reputation either. A lot of people who read his books, they're, at least from what I heard, his publishings were not well received because everyone kind of knew, like, this guy doesn't know crap.
Oh,
Like
so he's
he,
just one of those hoax people that's like, there's, I hate to call out this person. I'm sure they're very nice. There is a person in my hometown who drives around with the earth is flat truck who
oh
very
yeah,
firmly believes, you know who I'm talking about. If you live in
exactly.
Prescott, Arizona, you've seen this person driving around with the earth is flat painted like on all sides. So he's that type of person, the person who believes like even though if there's evidence against it, they're like, no, this is what I believe in.
So a lot of where people get the idea that Halloween might be satanic actually stems from the misconception that occurs here. So
That's
I figured
fascinating.
that's an interesting discussion point I think we could have on this type of episode. What is your viewpoint of Halloween? Do you see it as satanic or do you see it as absolutely not? And this guy is just total BS in it.
Well, so here's what I want to bring in here. I'm not going to disregard this guy, but historically, I want to jump back to the actual history for a second.
Okay.
Not to take away from the discussion, but it's going to lead up to what you're saying. So, actually, the Catholic Church, specifically the Vatican, were really strong influencers on what would become Halloween. These traditions, so when Romans took over the Celtic land, the pagan land that's now modern day Ireland, the Romans, instead of trying to take away these pagan holidays, they were like, let's just shift them a little bit, shift the mindset. So let's just say that we'll call Samhain All Saints Day. The tricks that are being had, we'll say that the saints are playing tricks on the people. And so they basically transitioned a lot of these pagan holidays to have a Christian narrative to make conversion actually easier for the pagans.
Yeah.
So as a result, they ended up making All Saints Day Hallowmas on November 1st, or also known as All Hallows Day. And they continued that transition even further by making November 2nd All Souls Day to honor the departed. So they kept a lot of those traditions where they could honor the departed, where they would pray for souls who were in purgatory, where they were stuck between heaven and hell. And the children would go souling, which is essentially begging from door to door, and they would ask for cakes and treats, and they would offer prayers in return for souls. So it's interesting that this author in the 1700s was very determined that it had a very satanic background, when in fact it was the Catholic Church, specifically the Vatican, who influenced a lot of what became the modern holiday.
Mm.
And Halloween essentially evolved into a more secular version of All Saints' Day, with going to the door asking for treats, honoring the dead, dressing up in costumes, which is more of like the pagan tradition that was kept. But what I thought was interesting in history a little bit later on was that Protestants in early America were not allowed to celebrate Halloween or All Saints' Day because it was too Catholic or too pagan. So
Mhm.
occasionally they'd celebrate in secret, but it started becoming a lot more popularized in American culture during the Irish and Scottish immigration post potato famine in the 1800s. When a lot of the Scots and the Irish moved, there were a lot of introductions to things like the jack-o'-lantern, which was actually based on a character that was kicked out of hell, where the devil gave him a ember from hell that he put in a turtle shell, which is what the jack-o'-lantern is partially inspired by. It also goes back to Celtic culture where they would carve out gourds to scare away spirits as well.
I also have that similar story down for the origin of the jack-o'-lantern. The character's name, just to add on to what you were saying, it's called Stingy Jack.
Stingy Jack. That's
Exactly.
hilarious. But yeah, so the mid 18th century within the potato famine, and I've skipped a few hundred years in there. There's a lot more. And on another day, if you happen to see me on the street, I will definitely bother you with all this information because it was fascinating to learn. I just find it was really interesting that the Scottish and the Irish people were very profoundly the ones who influenced what would become modern Halloween. In America, in the mid 1800s, kids would start dressing up in costumes, and they were given fruit when they would deliver jokes and songs and instead of doing prayers. There would be pranksters that would like steal things like fences, or they would wear masks. But in the early 1900s is where things got real, the commercialization
How
era, so
so?
to speak.
Ooh,
Ooh,
not capitalism.
not capitalism. No, so actually, what happened is really fascinating. There essentially was the theme of give us candy or we'll trash your house. 1939 is when the term trick or treat showed up in print for the first time. But in the 20s and 30s and 40s, Halloween became a terrorized holiday where people would go out and vandalize, and it became um, known as like Black Halloween, Hell Night, where there was a lot of destruction happening. People would set fire to
Ooh,
buildings. One particularly creative one was putting bars of soap on streetcar rails so cars would be derailed. Um,
okay.
yeah, super clever.
So I have
But
a little
it's,
note that kind of
yeah,
ties in with that, which is the origin of haunted houses. Very short,
yeah,
but
go into it.
it fits in with your storyline here. So as you were saying, yeah, 1920s and earlier, pranks were becoming way too violent. There were a couple instances where someone had put on a haunted house, believe it was in Britain, and eventually news kind of got out just of like the general idea of like what is a haunted house?
Mm-hmm.
And families in America started to see how violent Halloween was getting here. And so they
Uh-huh.
started putting on haunted houses in the 1930s as kind of a way to protect their children from going out into a dangerous environment and pulling dangerous pranks. It's kind of a way of pulling your family back together to be in one spot.
Wow. By
So
hosting a haunted house and having people like walk through it?
exactly, by hosting a haunted house. So 1930s is when we start to see the concept of haunted houses coming to America.
That's fascinating. So, around that time, like late 1930s, early 1940s, cities and local government organizations are getting fed up with all this violence. And they're like, we just need to start making up some games and some activities and like really leaning into the giving candy so they won't attack us type mentality. So one of the first like books that came out about hosting Halloween parties and events was Denison's Boggy's books. There's a whole series of them. I'll include a picture here. Basically, they're books about how to spend Halloween other than pranks. So it had things about parties, what to eat, how to dress. It was like basically a whole guide. It was the original Pinterest board for Halloween, essentially. And it was a way to keep people off the streets from causing violence. And shortly after that, at that point, we're starting to have more parties. We're sticking more to trick or treating. People are recognizing that if I give treats to these people coming at my door, they're not going to vandalize my home. In the 1950s, candy manufacturers caught on and they were like, okay, let me get on to this bandwagon and started offering a variety more of types of candies and specialty candies for this Halloween season. And film and TV started being impacted by Halloween as well and started showing Halloween features, scary movie festivals. Essentially, local local governments and local citizens were like, we're sick of the violence and we're going to make up a whole bunch of activities to make this all better, which a lot of these activities were inspired by these Celtic legends and these folks who came, like the Vatican and Catholic practices, and inspired by the Scottish and Irish folks who came over during the potato famine. Like all these activities, they basically combined together to make Halloween, which I think is what makes it such a cool holiday.
Well, so
Mhm.
the main theme I'm getting from your story, Kylie, is capitalism actually saved us.
It seems like capitalism in this instance kept Halloween from becoming just a ridiculously violent holiday for the rest of history. Yeah.
Ah,
Because
thank you, corporations.
thank you, corporations everywhere. Well, I thought that was really interesting because from then on, Halloween did become more family oriented. And like you were
Hmm.
saying, like there are family haunted houses and stuff. And like you were saying, it is run by corporations. It's a $1 billion industry with a B.
Yeah.
Like the 2015 National Retail Federation predicted spending could reach $6.9 billion dollars. It's the holiday is transformed in a variety of ways over the years, but it's kept a lot of its roots, which is really interesting. Like even down to the trick or treating from the times of the Roman Catholic era or the dressing up from the pagan era. Like there's a lot of really cool things that we've kept historically.
Hmm.
Even like the idea of bats being part associated with Halloween, that was due to Samhain because Samhain, the bonfires would attract insects, which attracted bats, and bats were known in medieval folklore as being
Ah,
harbingers of death.
that
So
makes sense.
it's
Okay.
freaking bats. I love Halloween.
So going back to my question before.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I think it's an interesting question to ask, since we're talking about the history of Halloween, part of its history has always been that it's sometimes controversial in circles, in Christian circles.
Mm-hmm.
So, one Christian to another, I wanted to ask, like, how do you view Halloween? Do you view it as satanic, or do you view it as totally fine?
As a Christian, I wouldn't celebrate it if I viewed it as satanic.
Hmm.
Like it's, I mean, if I was messing around with Ouija boards and trying to summon spirits for and giggles, sure. But I see Halloween as a time to dress up, to celebrate family and loved ones, and to make a good meal and throw a party with some friends. Or if you grew up in a very Midwestern Christian culture, go to a church festival and be in a costume contest and win a 10-cent goldfish that you'll kill in 2 weeks. Like stuff like that. It's like, it's a very family bringing, but like prankster at times and naughty holiday. It's not seen
Mhm.
as bad or evil, especially when historically the Catholic Church is one of the largest influences as to what made Halloween Halloween. So I
Yeah.
think when people are very quick to say, like, oh my gosh, this is like worshiping the devil, show me where.
Yeah, and so I'm in agreement with you of like I don't think this is like satanic in any way. At least the way that we celebrate Halloween. If we're looking at Samhain by definition of being pagan, I would say yeah, okay, that could be more demonic in a sense of having like a witches circle and stuff like that. But you were kind of talking about it earlier. The Catholic Church, what it traditionally did, it even did this with Christmas. It comes in and it takes those things and it kind of changes it around for people to celebrate in a different way to help change the narrative as or as the Catholic Church tries to, convert people.
Mm-hmm.
So, given how we celebrate it and what we're choosing to honor and what we're doing, which really, as you were saying, is family togetherness and just going out and getting some candy. Like that's the thing. There's no spiritual attachment to it of any kind. It's just,
I
kids
mean,
just want
other
some
than the
candy.
sugar rush that you're going to get afterwards and the sugar crash that'll follow, that's a
So yeah.
spiritual experience.
So yeah, I don't think this is evil in any way unless you treat it as such,
Yeah, and
which,
that's like, again, free will. You have the choice to practice certain practices, but I mean, you and I are both in the same page that that's not what we practice. And I would say there's a very large percentage of people who don't practice Halloween that way, but it is very quick to get villainized because, like, people like to scare people and things like that. But
Mhm.
back to the sugar crash for a minute. I looked
Yeah.
up,
On a lighter note, the
on a
sugar
lighter note,
crash.
to end things on a sweet, tasty note, I looked up the most popular candy by the decade. And because I
Ooh,
was just
okay. Let's
morbidly
hear it.
curious, and after the 1950s, candy became a core part of what made Halloween Halloween. And it's a big part of what makes it a $1 billion industry. So, 1900s, we're coming in hot with the classic Hershey's chocolate bar. Yum.
Just plain chocolate. Nothing in it, nothing special.
Nothing
The
special,
vanilla
just
of
chocolate.
chocolates.
Ugh, don't say it that way. I like Hershey's bars. It's 1920s. It's the rise of the nut. No innuendo intended, but totally there. Um, Baby Ruth's, Butterfingers, Reese's, Snickers, which came in the early 1930s, but 1920s, nutty chocolate was the theme. They were like, chocolate is boring now. We need something to make it a little more festive, a little more fun.
Some of these candies you're listing, like I didn't even realize my mind that they went this far back. So
I know. That's
please,
why I found this list because I thought, like, jump in at any time. Because as I was researching this, I was like, this is the most interesting thing. Like, I didn't know the Hershey's chocolate bar has been around for 125 years. That's so cool. Like, that's wild.
yeah,
So, if we're going to
no,
jump
I don't
into,
know why. Hershey's I could picture being like 125. I don't know why, but it's like the rest. For some reason, I'm like, in my mind,
oh,
it's like all candy started in the 60s or the 70s.
oh, I'm going to blow your mind. Just you
Let's see
wait.
it. Let's hear it.
1930s, 2-in-1 sweets, the Tootsie Pop, and Sky
What?
Bars. The Tootsie Pop has been around for almost 100 years.
Oh my goodness.
1931 is
Okay.
when the Tootsie Pop was made.
I wonder if they were
And
still asking back then, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop?
I think they were, which is like hilarious that they've not come up with a better head tagline since then. But it's great. As a kid, I always would initially I'd like try to lick it. I'm not going to do that for camera because that'll be changed into something else, I'm sure. Um,
But with the ads, so because you were talking about that, did you ever try and do exactly what they did in the ads? Because they always did the one, two, three, and then bite. Did you
I
ever try doing that as a kid?
I definitely would always try to bite it way too soon because I'd be impatient. I love Tootsie Pops though. I can't do it with my TMJ. My jaw just can't handle it. But I used to love Tootsie Pops. And I also was a
I
braces kid, and there were so many years that I could not have it because I had braces.
Yeah, before I had braces, as a very small child, we're talking like 4 or 5, I would see those commercials, and I thought literally that's how you were supposed to eat it. You're supposed to eat it
No.
3 licks and then bite down. And I can't. And the funny thing is that I didn't figure it out the first time. I
Well,
kept
that's on
doing it
brand for
a
you.
few more times. I was like, huh. I would be like, one, two, three, and take a bite. I'm like, didn't work. I must have done something wrong. Again, another
Oh
one.
no.
One, two, three.
How did you not break a
I'm
tooth
surprised I
from
still have my
that?
teeth. They were probably all baby teeth.
Yeah, so you probably did lose a tooth, at least one from that then.
Probably. I don't recall at this point anymore, but yeah.
Well, the 19
Definitely Child Nick made some questionable choices.
that's
But
facts. Adult Nick does too, but that's for another time. 1940s M&Ms. They were a wartime specialty
ooh.
because they had that hard shell outside so they wouldn't melt like a Hershey's bar. And you could buy them and send them to soldiers. So it
That
was a good
makes
little like
sense.
snack for them.
That makes sense. As a Boy Scout, we would sometimes just like eat MREs because we thought like, oh, we're so cool. It's like we're in the army. We're eating MREs on a camp out. And they would always have like a sweet treat in there. And it was
Uh-huh.
always like Skittles or M&Ms, that hard shell candy like you're just talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm just connecting some dots there. That makes
Connecting some
sense.
dots,
Easier to
less likely
transport.
to melt, easier to transport. The 1950s was the return to nostalgia, penny candy. So it was like lemon heads, Tootsie Rolls, Fireballs, like the singular serving size penny candy, basically.
Oh, I
Um,
love me a good fireball. Did you like lemon heads? Lemon heads,
I don't like lemon heads. There were like a
I
little
like the taste.
strawberry candy that my parents used to have in their office growing up that was singularly wrapped. That was like a penny candy, but it tasted like a strawberry and it was really, really good as a
I
kid.
think I know what you're talking about. Like you mean the wrapper itself looked like a strawberry, right?
Yes, yes.
I think my grandma would have those all the time around holidays. My grandma or someone else would have them all the time. I thought it was pretty good. The lemon heads, I liked the taste of it, but as I grew older, it made my lips pucker up way too much. You know, it was
Well, that's
way
kind of the goal of one, right?
exactly. Ugh. So
Any
you were
hoodles.
saying?
1960s, a lot of sugar. Color printing, color dyes were being influenced for the first time. So candy necklaces, peeps, pixie sticks, starburst, sweet tarts, zots. So like all the like really bright sugary candy came out in this era, which like you were saying earlier,
Mm,
1960s, 1970s, that's when I was initially doing this research, that made sense for when that type of candy was coming out because there was a lot
there you go.
more
So that's where it comes from.
experimental and sugary and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And following
Okay.
that, 1970s was the experimental candy, the pop rocks, the gobstoppers, the ring pops, like the
Ooh,
really,
Gobstopper. Was that also in Jawbreakers? Are you saying Jawbreakers are the same as Gobstoppers, or
I
do you
think
think
those
it was something
essentially
else?
are, yes, actually. According to my notes, I believe gobstoppers and jawbreakers were like in the same era. If not, they would have been like in the early 2000s, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's known as the experimental candy era. That was where candy makers were like, how can we sell more of this? Like, and just make it weirder and more interesting to digest. And in the 1980s was the chewy candy era outside of
Ooh,
Skittles.
okay.
Skittles came from Britain in the 70s, but they were introduced into America in the 80s. Sour Patch Kids, which came from Canada, jelly beans, which crazy side note, jelly beans were really popular in the US because Ronald Reagan loved them so much. Allegedly, he would have 720 bags shipped to him per month, which he would distribute among federal buildings.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I like the how you ended it there, like the distributing. I thought you meant like he would eat 720 bags every month. I'm like, how do you live? How do you
His
survive?
blood pressure would be insane.
Exactly.
No, I appreciate imagining just like this giant shipment of jelly beans every single month, and then every federal building having like 100 bags of jelly beans for federal employees to enjoy. Be like, ah, the president's at it again, ordering more jelly beans.
I can imagine being a government worker and your boss just telling you, in light of a Christmas bonus this year, our commander in chief has given us more jelly beans. Congratulations to everyone. More jelly beans.
Congratulations, more jelly beans. Every month you get jelly beans, not a bonus. That's incredible. The 1990s were the era of sour candy, warheads, airheads, crybabies.
Oh, I
The
remember
90s they were on one. They just wanted to feel
I
pain.
thought I remember I had a sour like a you said it was called the sour head, right? Or am I
Hmm.
thinking of something else? Yeah, I remember having that for the first time when I was a teenager, and I thought it was so cool because of what the image was on the candy. I like the guy's head exploding. I'm like, yeah, this is the sourest candy ever. And I put it in
Yeah.
my mouth. I'm like, doesn't even faze me, guys.
Well, that will bring me to say if you guys want us to do a taste test for social media of the candy from each decade, please let us know. We'll totally do it.
Ooh,
An
it'd be a good
excuse to
excuse to build
eat.
up my Halloween candy cache, you know?
Exactly. Build up my sugar tolerance. See if I can survive without dying all the from eating all this candy. But my favorite era has got to be, I think, the 2000s because this is the extreme candy era. They had more sour, more challenging to eat. So they would have giant lollipops, giant gummy bears, experimenting with weird flavors like bacon and wasabi and every flavor bean. So the extreme era. Do you have like
Mhm.
a favorite decade of candy based on the ones that I listed?
That's a tough one. If you're talking to if you're talking to younger Nick,
Hmm.
it would have been the 60s with the Starburst and you said Skittles wasn't until 70, but all that brightly colored sugary candy, that was
Yeah.
my jam. Like pre-teen, all my preteen years. And then I want to say somewhere around high school, I started losing my taste for that, and I became
Hmm.
all about the chocolate. So if I had to pick like a specific era that I like, it'd be what was it, the 30s? 30s is where you're talking about chocolate, right? For the most part.
That's the 2-in-1 sweets, like the Tootsie Pops.
I see. So then probably somewhere around the 30s is where I kind of bridge off, and I'm like, that's where I start to go from liking it to not liking it. If I had to pick
Okay.
one though, one that I really love, my favorite candy bar would have to be it'd have to be between the 100 grand bar,
Hmm.
you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or a Snickers. I really like a good Snickers.
I love a
Before
Snickers
that, it
too.
was
I'm allergic to peanuts, but I love a good Snickers every once in a
what's funny is that I've kind of it was like a process of evolution for me to get to liking Snickers. First, when I was a kid, my go-to candy bar was the Three Musketeers, so just chocolate and nougat.
Same.
Exactly. I get it
We had
every
the
time I
same
go to the movie
childhood.
theater. I would get every single time I go to the movie theater with a bucket of popcorn. And then when I got to about my teenage years, that's when I discovered what Milky Way was. I started getting
Mm,
like, ooh, nougat, chocolate, and caramel. And then of course, eventually there's just one logical step next or forward. It was caramel, nougat, chocolate, and peanuts, the Snickers bar.
nice. Well, for me, probably M&Ms. 1940s. I've always loved M&Ms. I could still kill a whole thing of M&Ms. I love putting them in the freezer and eating them really cold or putting them on popcorn. But I love a good
Ooh,
Snickers too. Like Three Musketeers, what I grew up with. It's too sweet for me now, but I think it's somewhere in high school when I was taking my driving exam. Some driving video I watched was like, a Snickers can be a good snack on the go because it has sugar and protein. So me as a 15-year-old was like, that's got to be true. So I got really into Snickers for a while because of that. But as an adult, I've developed a peanut sensitivity. So I like Reese's and Snickers are probably my favorite bars, and I can't have them anymore. I totally still have them around Halloween because the pumpkin shaped ones are just to die for, but don't tell my mom. She'll get really, really mad.
so
I
hopefully
just,
she's not watching.
hopefully she's not watching. She doesn't watch our show. But yeah,
Even
so
then,
I
Kylie,
think
you're what, 27 now? I think your
I'm
mom won't
26.
ground
Don't
you.
age me.
Oh gosh. Oh,
Aw.
okay.
Well, anyways, I would say I
Oh,
think if our audiences want us to try some candies, let us know. There's some really interesting candies here, and some of them I've never even tried. So let us know in the comments what your go-to Halloween candy is to add some spice to the conversation.
I liked what you said earlier about the M&Ms in your popcorn. Really weird thing I did as a kid. Totally hot take. Skittles and popcorn.
Ugh.
That's what I did
Okay,
as a kid.
I'm
Every
trying not
time
to judge
I
you
went
right
to the movie
now.
theaters, Skittles
Every
and popcorn.
time?
It was I don't know. Every time. I don't know how I got to that, but I did it every time. I would get a thing of Skittles. I get the bucket of popcorn with my dad, and I would just pour the Skittles all on top.
Okay, so if we do a taste test, we're gonna do that with you doing that as an adult, because I'm really curious to see if you would like that now,
Probably not. It'd be
because it
terrible.
sounds,
I don't even like Skittles anymore.
oh,
Oh my
well, I don't
gosh.
like Skittles
They're too
either.
sweet.
I've tried to like them. They were such like the cool kid candy, and I was like, this is gross. I don't know why everyone likes these, but
Well, I
let
really
us
liked
know.
them, but
Hmm.
but my problem was that as a kid, I just remember I would eat a lot of Skittles, and then one year I went to the dentist and they had to pull out a baby tooth of mine, and he showed me it. It was actually rotted to the core, and it had different layers of artificial color on it. Like I could see like a clear line of like green on there and purple and yellow and red.
That's
Like
so
I
gross.
saw it. I was like, after that, I couldn't do Skittles because I was like, I know what happened. I ate a lot of Skittles before I came here, and I was like,
That's so
that's ugh.
gross. Oh, okay. This is a your friendly PSA from your parents over here saying, please brush your teeth after you eat all the candy this weekend and early next week because your dentist will laugh at you when they pull out a tooth that is multicolored
Yeah.
and it'll hurt
Ugh.
really bad too.
It was not a fun experience as a 10-year-old or however old I was.
Ugh. Well, to end things on a lighter note, let us know in the comments if we should do a candy taste test. And thank you all for joining us for our Halloween Spooktacular 2024, where we talked all things vampires, RPGs, and Halloween origins. We hope you learned something today and that you had a great time. Make sure to like and subscribe. And keep in mind that the next episode is a standalone Pester the Gaster episode with a Hollywood assistant coming out on November 8th. So make sure to stay tuned for that, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.